decarbonising buildings. Now, buildings, as you know, huge part of our environment, huge part of the way that we live, and we know that buildings are a real factor when it comes to the transition. And decarbonisation has been something that has been very tricky for people right across the globe, but also very much so here in Europe. Buildings make up 40% of energy consumption in the EU. Let me please welcome our expert panel to debate how we can decarbonise buildings. Please welcome on stage, and if you could save your applause for the end, Philippe Delorme, the Executive VP Europe Operations at Schneider Electric. We have Stefan Moser, Head of Unit, Buildings and Products at DG ENA. Paul Mikkelaf, the Global Director Grid Leader at EY, and Femke de Jong from the European Climate Foundation. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. I wonder, before we start, I'm just going to run along the panel, if I may, and just ask you to very, very briefly outline for the audience just your connection with sustainable buildings, just so that the audience can sort of understand where you all fit into this. Femke, shall I start with you?
Yes, of course. So I'm Femke. I work at the European Climate Foundation, which is a strategic regranter and convener of a very large community working towards climate action, and I work on buildings in particular.
Fantastic, thank you.
Decarbonizing buildings.
Brilliant. Paul?
Very good. Good afternoon. Paul McAuliffe. I work for EY, where I lead digital grid. For me, where buildings come into kind of my line of work is, of course, the integration of those smart buildings with the grid, and the big role buildings and smart buildings and active buildings have to play in the decarbonisation of the energy system.
I have a feeling that word active buildings may come into our discussions a little bit later. Stefan.
Thank you very much. So we're working on the regulatory framework, but also the broader policy development, renovation wave, energy performance of buildings directive, but also heat pumps, action plan, eco-design regulations for heating and cooling products. So smartness, demand response, and interoperability are extremely important. Electrification is the big mega trend, so I'm very happy to discuss with you here today.
Brilliant. And Philippe?
Great. So I work at Schneider Electric, for which I would say 50% of our business is with buildings. And we mostly build technology dedicated to active energy efficiency, and I think we're going to be back to that topic.
We will certainly be back on that topic, yes. Now, before we sort of get into that discussion, I'd sort of like to know how you feel about buildings and decarbonising buildings. So if you wouldn't mind getting your mobile phone out for me. And we have a quick poll for you. And if you point your phone, if you can find that at the QR code, you should be able to get straight into the question, or it will pop up for you anyway if you've already used Slido today. Brilliant. Okay, let's go on to what the question is and see what we are asking everyone. So, from your perspective, I like the fact there was suddenly a little bit of laughter in the room. It was almost like, oh yeah, tricky one. From your perspective, what key findings hinder the widespread adoption of energy-efficient renovations in buildings? So we're looking at renovations. In other words, what's the biggest challenge here? Top one is the regulations challenge, lack of standardized regulations and guidelines. Then we've got money. Philippe's going, money, yes. Insufficient financial incentives for building owners and developers. Number 3 is the research, R&D, research and development in new techniques. Number 4 is the lack of understanding of recycling and reusing. So basically, you know, reusing what there already is. Remember, we're looking at renovations. And I've put an extra one in there. The size of the task. Is the biggest challenge actually the fact that there are so many buildings that need to be upgraded? Femke, which one would you go for?
Yeah, I would definitely go for the last.
So if it wasn't the size of the task, by the way, does everyone agree with that, the size of the task? Yeah, maybe, yeah. So if it wasn't that one, what would you feel would be the trickiest, Femke?
Well, I think decarbonizing buildings, right, is very important. As you mentioned before, it's a huge contributor to our greenhouse gas emissions. But there are more than just, it's more about decarbonizing buildings, right? I think buildings are really where you see the intersection between the energy transition as well as people's daily lives. They are the places where we can see the benefits of the transition in terms of comfortable homes, more affordable energy bills, but we have seen lately there can also be venues for backlash. And this is because when we think about the transition, it's really about the existing building stock. The buildings in Europe have been there for a long time. They will still be there in 2050. So different with cars and other products, where you just buy a new one that is electric, you would need to do something about people's homes, the places they go to school in, the places they work in, and that's a huge societal challenge that we need to do together.
So maybe I should have put another one in then. The societal challenge, but also the personal aspect of the fact you're dealing, in some cases, someone's home. That actually for you is that one. Okay. Philippe, what do you think? Which one would you go for?
I would start with what we have.
Okay.
Just to be, I think we have 90% plus of the technology available today to make most of the new buildings and existing buildings net zero. I repeat, 90% of the technologies are available today to make building net zero.
90% of the technology is available. Okay.
Everywhere we go and we work, whether on new buildings or existing buildings, we find the means to drive those very good outcomes.
So you would totally cancel out the lack of research and development?
I think there is a lack of awareness.
Lack of awareness, but
People
it's there.
don't know what they don't know, but the technologies do exist.
Okay.
There's been ample press and on the fact that there is all the windows and installation you need. By the way, it's true, but I think there is way not enough awareness about the digital technologies that can be deployed very fast, very efficiently, with very fast return on investment.
Okay.
Now, what do we miss? I would say the first part, and it's very timely because people, I mean, as we speak, there are very deep discussion on the EPBD and the new market, energy market design, which in our view are very powerful tool to accelerate that thing, which again is a big opportunity.
Okay, tell you what I'll do. Let's see the answers, and then I'll get comment from Paul and Stefan. So, money. Look, I like that, Philippe. Lack of research and development of new techniques, zero. They all agree. It's all there. Money. Stefan, what do you take from that? Actually, shall I go to Paul first, just because you turned around and nodded madly at that? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's spot on. I think not just the capital it takes to retrofit the building, but I think the thing that is a real barrier is also the lack of knowledge and the lack of awareness of customers of the benefit that they can gain from having an active building participating in the energy system as a flexible asset. So that's one. So we also have, making that even harder, the lack of awareness, right? Mm-hmm. But also, I don't think we have the right products in the market, right? I don't think we have the right propositions in the market yet in terms of available. I mean, we've got lots of financial instruments, but do we have the right commercial instruments that attract customers to those propositions to retrofit their building, right? I think it's the whole thing around finance. It's not just the amount it's going to take, but I think it's the awareness of the value they can get and the financial instruments and propositions for customers.
Philippe, just hang on a sec. So can I just confirm, when you say not the right products, are you talking about financial products, i.e. the I don't know, loans, whatever it is, or are you talking about products as in?
No, not the tech. Not the tech. I'm not talking about the tech. I'm talking about financial instruments being available to consumers, right? And how we package them and how we market them. I mean, if you look at how to decarbonize your building versus buying a Tesla, the marketing is very different, right? So we don't market it in the same way.
No, we certainly don't. No. Sorry, I was just imagining what an advert for for a house in the same way as a Tesla would be like. Maybe that's the way that we need to go. Philippe, go on, you wanted to get in there.
On the financial part, because money matters, I mean, any incentive we can get to accelerate is welcome. Now, we are here in Europe, where something happened 15 months ago with the war in Ukraine, having an impact, and many of us know about that, on the energy costs. And overall, the energy cost is 2 to 3 times what it was 18 months ago. That means that any payback on an energy efficiency project has been divided by 2. So things that were taking 5 to 7 years to pay back now are taking less than 3. And people are very pragmatic at a time where any real estate owner is looking at the value of its assets, and any asset that is F or E has 30% less value in its portfolio. Any asset that A or B has probably 10 to 20% added value. So I'm just saying there are a few tailwinds here that are coming for the good news, bad news of the high energy cost in Europe that hopefully will trigger, and we see it every day, real estate portfolio owner to go much faster to greenify their portfolio because the economics are pushing them here. Now, if we can top up with financial incentive, that's even better.
Stefan.
Well, it's a combination of several factors. It's regulatory framework, it's financing, it's technical knowledge and advice, awareness. And that's what we are trying to do, to put together a systematic framework and also make sure that member states adopt a systematic approach. Obligations for individual buildings, but also a call on neighborhood district approaches, having complete and comprehensive renovation plans based on high quality data, very important to address the shortcomings really, and then have, I would say, systematic and comprehensive planning for each building, what needs to be done by when, step by step if needed, if it cannot be done in one go. And that I think, and what my fellow panelists have said, I think the technologies are there, the solutions are there, they need to be deployed, they need to be the incentives, but also the obligations supported by advice and on the ground really, and financial products which can be easily used. There is enough money. I think that's the important message. There is enough money. We get this confirmation from everywhere, not from the taxpayer, so that is not the aim. But there will have to be some money from the public purse for the social aspects, vulnerable citizens, most vulnerable and least well-performing houses. But also from the financial industry, from the banking sector, we need to create investment cases. Yeah? So usually it's investments. It's not lost money. It's increasing the value of the building stock, and that can be paid back over time. What we need to make sure is that the liquidity is provided and a reasonable financial schedule is agreed based on good information. And that, I think, would then bring in enough private money to finance all these very important investment cases across society. But we do have a public good challenge for the most vulnerable neighborhoods, for the worst performing buildings, where basically we cannot rely on the market to deliver, because this would lead to people being pushed out from a building which has been renovated because it becomes too good for them, so too expensive.
Too expensive, yeah. Femke, let me come to you on this one, and let me just pose the question to the audience, because you very rightly said it's a societal issue and it's what people know or expect or can afford. I didn't put that on the list. I should have done. Would you raise your hands if you think that is a really significant barrier, the public perception, and also not having, I don't want to say the understanding because it sounds derogatory, but the awareness of what could be saved? Would you raise your hands if you think that actually is a significant challenge here? Okay, yeah. Right. Over to you, Femke. How do we deal with this then? How is that challenge addressed? You've heard, comments about there is enough finance.
Yeah, I don't think finance alone by itself is going to do the trick, right? I think, as Stefan was saying, we need a combination of everything, and we need to do that fast. And I don't know if I can maybe give an example of the country where
Please
I'm
do.
from, the Netherlands, because we've heard a lot, I think, for those working on buildings and heating about Germany. But in the Netherlands, actually, we have a similar process happening whereby the government has said from 2026, only hybrid heat pumps will be allowed to be installed. And the way that we didn't see a backlash around that the public sort of accepted it, is because it was part of a long process, right? It started with a climate agreement with different political groups and societal stakeholders, where it was set by 2050 we need a gas-free building stock. By 2030 we need 1.5 million homes no longer heated by gas. We're going to empower municipalities to develop local heat transition plans, which they needed to do by 2022, ideally involving also citizens and communication with citizens about the options and financial products they have available to make a switch. And then different actors, the grid operators, the installer groups, the heating industry and NGOs, as well as the government sat together and developed an action plan. How can we overcome all of the different barriers, because there are many? How can we reduce installation times? How can we reduce the cost of the sustainable options, etc.? And then when the government presented its proposal this year, it came alongside a lot of financial instruments, 0% interest loans for low-income households, subsidies for the investments costs that will be needed, also different regulations and financial products for renovation. And it's not yet done. I think there's still some work to be done to have the very low-income households be able to profit also from this transition and be one of the first to be prioritized. But I think it's an example of how it's part of a process. We need all the pieces in place, and we need this approach and lessons learned from all the different countries, also coming to the EU level, but also to other countries to make this a success.
Just a very couple of quick questions from me. What about the rental sector? Who pays? But also there is there has been in some countries a lack of the actual support engineering staff to fit all of this, and is that a challenge as well?
Yeah, that is a challenge. That's why in the Netherlands, but also I think as part of the EU heat pump action plan, for example, but also it's going to be the same for renovation. It's really to work with the installers groups, right? Because there is a lot of retraining to be done. We have a lot of installers already that at the moment install boilers that can be retrained for, in this case, heat pumps. But because it takes longer to install a heat pump, we do need more people, and this is something to be worked on. But it's a collective effort, I think, also to make it more attractive. And I think
the rental sector.
The rental sector is an important one, and different countries take different approaches. But what is in the Netherlands, for example, you also see it in a lot of other countries like the UK, where you have an obligation where the worst performing buildings need to be renovated up to a decent standard, and then social safeguards in place to make sure that it doesn't lead to sort of very high rent increases. Then people can still afford to live in their homes while living in a home that is more comfortable and have lower energy bills as well.
So that's very much concentrating on domestic homes. Does anyone on the panel want to come in on any of the points that Femke has raised there, or maybe another example from that you feel you can share, Philippe?
I would say in the real estate, the force of the market will apply, which is today, if you are a real estate owner and you want, let's say, office buildings, if that building is F or if that building is A, the rental is not the same, because the tenants don't want to go in a building that's not very energy efficient. More and more people are asking questions. So I'm cautiously optimistic that somewhat the force of the market will apply. Now, on the point where you were saying, okay, there is enough money, I don't think there is enough money dedicated to this. Just one figure which to me is striking. In the past 15 months, the European Union has paid more than 800 billion of fuel subsidies. I repeat, 800 billion of fuel subsidies. Does it hurt? How much have we spent to drive forcefully energy efficiency across Europe? Not a fraction of that money. So doing this is equal to burning money on the past versus preparing yourself for the future. So no, there is not enough money. The forces of the market are helping, but we cannot be happy with what we have, no in terms of incentive, nor in terms of regulatory framework, whether the coming EPBD, which has to come, or the energy market design, which has to come before the end of the year.
So are you suggesting this was a political miss to spend money on energy subsidies rather than diverting that to insulate homes or
put in place active energy efficiency, which actually is even faster return on investment. And I understand why politicians have been doing this. It's like you take a painkiller rather than take antibiotics to treat yourself. But we've learned with the COVID that, okay, you can take painkiller, but it's better to put in place a vaccine. And I consider the energy efficiency approach as being the best vaccine for the energy crisis, not taking painkillers.
So sort of tackling the source, the root cause of the problem. Quick show of hands if you agree with Philippe there, actually the money would have been better spent. Someone even put their hand up before I'd finished. Would have been better spent on that. Okay, I think, yeah. There we go. Stefan, did you want to come in on that one? Your thoughts?
I fully agree. We need to make structural improvements to increase our resilience. But of course, in an ad hoc crisis, as we were facing it, we need to survive in the short term. I think that is definitely justified for social support needs. But I think what happened also is that money has not always been spent in the most targeted manner. It has been spread widely, even across those who did not really need it for survival over the winter, let's say. That I think is the important task for governments, to be as precise and targeted as possible in order to preserve as much money as possible for structural improvements, increasing our long-term resilience. And I think that is a task which last winter is the past, but which should not be repeated and should be made, I think, a topic of thorough reflections for the coming winter and following winters, and to accelerate basically the renovations in the building sector, but also structural improvements across the broader economy.
Eyes wide open going forward then. I promised that we would talk about active buildings. Who would like to explain this concept and what you think society should be embracing? Philippe, over to you.
So what does active energy efficiency means? So I guess all of you know what passive means, which is you change windows, you put insulation. The good thing with this is you touch it, you see it, it's easy. Now, actives are digital technology that allows you to automate good practices to make sure that you save energy. So step number one, you measure, because you don't improve what you don't measure. And in the PBD and in the energy market design, there is a real push to make sure that we put in place metering and sub-metering so that you have a base loads and you know what you're talking about. Basic. Second one is you automate. And just as a point of reflection, every time you go in a city, you look at how many buildings still have the light on at night, and therefore where HVAC is on, which basically is 50% of the energy spent. And you'll see many light on, meaning that most of the buildings across the night are still on. So if you look mechanically at this and say, okay, put all those buildings off at night, 50% of energy cost going down and energy spent going down. For this, you need to automate, because human beings are
Hang on,
lazy.
Philippe, before you say you need to automate, can't you just educate people to turn lights off?
Useless. I mean, I'm a simple guy, and I still go, the energy is high, and in how many places across a city do you still see the light on? So the practice shows you it doesn't work. Okay? So it doesn't work, we need to change solution.
Okay.
And solution is you automate. You know, I got 4 kids, my teenagers lecture me on sustainability, and then they still put the light on because they don't they don't realize. So I've lost hope into human nature into that one. We need technology.
No. We
Period.
don't lose hope
Point.
in human nature.
And so what is active energy efficiency? Measurement, simple automation, so that the light and the HVAC of building goes off. And when we start to be smarter with local energy production, actually that building can also talk to the grid and sell back some energy at times where there is shortages, demand response, which is something that is very common in the US and is very rare in Europe. Why is that at time where we run the risk of blackout? So active energy efficiency is exactly this. Technology is available, and we need to do it now.
Okay. Who wants to... Paul, did you want to come in on that?
No, I think, I'm not sure I've lost all faith in humanity, but
No.
I'm not sure I go that far, but I still have hope. But you are right. I mean, there's certain things that is just easier to automate and control. I'd actually add perhaps a slight refinement to your definition, which is, I think an active building is one that's also responsive to its outside environment, whether that's signals from the grid or signals from the environment going on outside it, as well as to whoever is in the building.
Can you just explain exactly what you mean by that? Give us an example of what that could be.
Yeah, so just a simple example is there's a local congestion event on the grid. There's some kind of thermal congestion ongoing in the grid, and the grid needs a certain amount of capacity. It can call, the distribution company can call on assets, in this case a building, to participate by either turning up, turning down, or turning off consumption or production.
So in very simple terms, does that mean, and this is very simple terms, I apologize, your washing machine could stop mid-cycle if the grid needs it to?
No, I'm not sure the washing machine
See, there
would
was
stop
laughter
mid-cycle.
there. Philip shook his head.
But
No, okay. So
you could have a battery that could dispatch.
okay, right.
The heating system would stop, and the
Okay.
heating system is 50% of your energy bill. If we stop the air conditioning for 10 minutes, nobody will notice,
That's right.
even less.
Or turn the
Nice,
temperature up a
but-
couple of degrees. Yeah. Well, nobody will notice. But that's very helpful to the system, right? That participation of that building to the system is very helpful.
So that would need a lot of regulations, that would need a lot around it supporting that. You're shaking your head, but Stefan, did you
I'm
want
not
to?
sure. It
Okay.
needs a simple open market
Okay.
in all member states, because here again, the technology do exist. Now, not everyone agrees that this would be a good idea. We think it's a fundamental idea, first, to avoid any blackout across Europe in the coming years. Because you were mentioning last winter, okay, we were all freaked out in December about risk of blackout and stuff like this. What has changed structurally between last December and next December? Nothing, because we've not put in place the energy efficiency we need.
Okay, Stefan.
I think with electrification, which is a mega trend for both transport and buildings, there's a much bigger need to think system-wide, to integrate also the building and the car basically in the broader system. Therefore, to interact as much as you can, and to do that, you need the best friend, which is automation. So automation is the best friend in our own interest to make our lives easier. And not to manually switch on and switch off everything. You could do that. You could say basically some person is employed in a multi-apartment house to go around and switch on, switch off the different buttons. This is simply not efficient. Automation is the best friend to do that. I think we as citizens need to understand with electrification we are becoming much more part of a larger puzzle also in the buildings. Before we had maybe a stove, yeah? You were cold, you just put in a log, you put on the fire, and then it's only you. Nobody else is affected. That's it. But with electrification, you're part of it. And you're part of it in contributing positively to increase resilience, to stabilize. You can use the building as a storage. You can take up cheap energy when it's actually there. And say, okay, I go down, but through automated systems if there's a problem in the grid. And that reduces cost for society, reduces bills. You need to put less money on increased generation, on backup capacity, on the grid. You can avoid all these investments. So basically by intelligently interacting, it's cheaper for all of us. And that, I think, needs to come across. We have the tools, we need to employ them, we need to see them as best friends and not as threatening our lives, or maybe data privacy and data protection is very important. That has to come in, we need to be very transparent on that.
Yep.
But that could stand in the way with some people as a counter-argument, but we have to be very clear what was actually good for society, balance that with what is good for individuals.
That's exactly the question I'm going to ask Femke, because you talked earlier about the societal challenge, public perception, acceptance, etc., etc. So when it comes to connected homes, which is what we are talking about, data collection, privacy, transparency. There are many challenges to getting that universally accepted. Do you see that as a problem?
Yes, but maybe also to go back, because there was a question, do we need more regulation? I think we need more implementation, to be fair. I mean, in the end, right, we want also active solutions to be affordable, accessible, and attractive to consumers. And I don't know how many people here are from Brussels, but I think one of the starting points would be having a smart meter, for example. This is something that people living here, unless you have an electric vehicle, don't have. This is, I think, the first step. You need access also to dynamic tariffs, and you can have all sort of business models around that. But we're working with consumer groups as well, and they would find it very important to also have sufficient consumer protection, right? Which is not always the case, so you're not stuck with one provider or one, for example.
Absolutely. I'm going to open the floor to some questions. Gentleman down here, we'll get a microphone to you. Another one over there. Let's come to this one first. Yep, lovely. Okay. Superb. I will try and remember my order.
Hi, my name is Samir Abud. I'm the CEO of Energy. We are a provider of geothermal energy for heating for the large cities. And my question goes to district heating and building out of the electricity grid, because we are talking so much about building out the electricity grid, and we need to do that. And we all know that that is very, very expensive. But we actually also have infrastructure for the heating, which is the district heating, which is much cheaper to build out. And it's actually an infrastructure that's neutral to technologies. So you can put all kind of heating into this infrastructure. It's surplus heat from power to X, from CCS, from geothermal, waste incineration. How do you see the build out of district heating compared to just building out the electricity grid? Because if we just build out with individual heat pumps, then we need to build out the grid to cater for the coldest day.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Who'd like to pick out district heating? Stefan, yeah.
I mean, this is exactly what we need to do in a systematic approach, is seeing what actually are the strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities in neighborhoods, where there's district heating, geothermal potential, for instance, but also apart from geothermal, district heating networks already in place, opportunities to decarbonize even further the district heating systems. That should be done. That's why we need the municipal heat planning, heat and cool planning. We need broader municipal, I would say, participatory processes with the citizens to really see which neighborhoods should go in which direction, to help them plan what is individual, what is collective, what is for society. And I think to identify the lowest cost and most efficient solutions, and district heating, geothermal are definitely part of it. There's a huge potential, and often it's a combination even of geothermal and electrification through heat pumps, heating up for the last mile, basically, or some additional temperature, but based on already what is delivered through geothermal, for instance. Yeah? But geothermal goes, district heating goes beyond that, of course. It's much broader. There's an opportunity to bring in also other renewable solutions. And I think it's a very efficient delivery, which has to be organized in society, so collectively. And people need to know whether they can rely on a society solution, even if it's just a district or a neighborhood, or they have to rely entirely on themselves, because there is no such collective solution. But for instance, you would then think about how to optimize my own building with a heat pump, for instance, or something else which allows access to renewable energy.
Am I right in thinking that there's a situation where there was a small town had a planning appeal because a data center wanted to be built there, and part of the planning was, okay, we will heat your local swimming pool and there'll be district heating. Now, it was a hugely controversial issue, but I wonder whether that is also something that can be looked at. So that planning gain, so when something goes through, like a data center gets planning permission, you get free heat.
I was exactly thinking about it because that's what we are doing in countries like Sweden, for instance. And clearly there will be more data center because we are more addicted to AI and so on. So, and the new AI data center are going to use a lot more energy because there will be a lot more cooling on the servers. So it's a very good idea. It's something that's practical. Now, there is a cultural dimension to district heating, which is, it's largely adopted in some countries, quite a bit in the north. I'm not sure that if you were to go to Barcelona or whatever and say, okay, we're going to put... so we need to be conscious that there are places where it's acceptable and, let's say, usual, and there are places where it's not. But you are very right. It's a very important tool to drive a more energy-efficient world.
But also when we look at our cities as well, there'll be housing stock where it's just not. No. Did you want to come in, Paul?
I mean, district heating has a place. I think we need every tool, every lever we can, right? But I want to pick up on your point about reinforcement of the grid. I think ultimately, you know, you add an EV to a house, it doubles the intensity of the house, of the building. You add a heat pump, it trebles it. So we're going to need to reinforce the grid. Active buildings can help do two things. Firstly, provide 160 gigawatts of flexible capacity to the system that we so desperately need, right? And then the second thing I'll say is that actually having active buildings allows us to defer somewhere in the region of 4 to 8 billion in reinforcement per year. So for me, when you look at it, I think district heating has a place to play, but we're not going to get away from the reinforcement of the grid.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a remark. I hear all the time, we need to do this and we need to do that. And the technology is already there, but we only need to do it. I'm going to add a little bit to this discussion because it's not only that the technology is there are also companies there. So I give you an explanation about the Netherlands. I think the Netherlands is a really great country to look at if you want to see the energy transition going on. Why is that? Because it has the highest PV installed per capita. So that also means we have the highest, I think, grid congestion problem. And apart from that, we have the highest number of EV chargers installed. And we have about 150,000 customers who are having dynamic prices, so not flat prices, but they pay per hour. And I think there are roughly 6-7 companies who offer dynamic prices already. And for instance, I give you an example of a startup that's from Norway. It's called Tibber. They offer an energy management service where you can connect all your devices to their service. So these are heat pumps, these are chargers, these are PV installations. And with that, customers can do smart energy management systems.
So they can actually, they can do it themselves and
they can do it themselves, but even more important, they can do trading. So they can decide when to buy power and when to sell power. So these consumers have become prosumers. They have become partners of the energy companies. So my advice would also be for next year, to invite these kind of companies. Because what I notice is that in our field, there's a big split between quite a conservative side and these new companies, startups with young people in their 20s who are doing great stuff. And if I hear, last sentence, that Germany still has no smart meters, then to be honest, that's a little bit of a joke. So we need to do it all faster and not speaking about we can do this and we can do that, we should do it now, and it's happening now.
The world of technology, and actually you get the disruptors in many different industries, and what you're describing is the disruptors coming into the sector. We've got one final question just down here. We'll quickly get a microphone to you. Lovely, thank you. Just
thank you.
Quick one if you can.
Yes, so on the topic of demand-side management, generally speaking, right? Active, passive energy efficiency, but if you also throw in the behind-the-meter flexibility, there is a real dilemma. If you look at the survey responses, right? We are saying there's not enough financial incentives for the customers to participate, but then we also have business models and regulations that insulate the customers from the volatility of the wholesale prices. How do we solve this conundrum?
Okay, yeah, not dissimilar to what we talked about earlier. So who would like to go for that one?
I think I'm back to the point, which is stop subsidizing the technologies of the past and what I call the age of fire, and encourage by either regulation or money the drive to more digital, to more startups that are indeed disruptive the game, but that are in the end business opportunities. Because we look at all the pain and so on. These are great innovation. So it's a space for Europe to lead the pack and create new businesses. So we should welcome that.
Stefan?
I think I very much agree with what you just said also, but we need to create the demand basically through a kind of modern and forward-looking regulatory framework, bring together financial resources, create investment cases and technical advice in order to create demand. The solutions are there, the companies can deliver, various here represented, but also others outside the room, but there need to be the decisions to renovate, yeah? So, and I would say the structured, comprehensive trajectory put in place, what to do, where exactly, by whom. And that I think is very important, that the we becomes concrete by who does what, by when exactly, and so on. And that I think is the objective of the improved regulatory framework, but also the national renovation plans, broken down at the regional local level also, where the different challenges will be put on paper and discussed in an inclusive manner, but then also it becomes the reference point for investments and demand and creation of renovation demand, where the solutions are then put in practice and bought, basically. Someone needs to buy them. And now we have too much of a, I would say, still sluggish overall reaction by society. People are waiting and seeing, and maybe not now, maybe a bit later. And maybe I can avoid it entirely. And this is a bit the approach. It's not yet jumping on the opportunities, but a bit of inertia in the system, yeah? So.
Bit of wait and see from the public as well. Quick word from you, Paul?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I don't think the market structures and design we have currently across Europe particularly incentivizes broad participation. The reality, though, is that there are glimmers of hope around Europe for participation of flexible assets. I think you look at the UK, there's already integrated several hundred megawatts of flexible assets into the grid. So we can do it. We know how to do it. It's proven it's been done. I think regulation needs to catch up to the fact that flexibility is a very, very important tool in getting us to the energy transition.
Femke, just a final word from you. No? Are you in agreement, or?
To most of what was said, yes. I think you raised a very important point, but I think also with Enargi in the room and others, we already have some innovators, but it's true, we need more of that, and we need I think we need to move towards specifically for the transition, a much more collaborative approach towards the common objective, in this case, decarbonizing buildings.
I think we can certainly all agree on that, a collaborative approach to move forward, definitely. It's been really interesting to hear about the new technologies and also the different ways of moving our buildings towards decarbonisation. Thank you so much to our expert panel joining us here today. Thank you.